Seeking Water this semester, correct? Okay. I'm not sure if I trust you, James, but okay. There will be Seeking Water on Tuesday, Ignite on Wednesday, and a men's woman event on Thursday, which right now there's talks of it being something like Manhunt or trivia. All sorts of things are being talked about, so just wait and see in the group me in the email to figure out what it is. But now, to get us started, we're going to do a little bit of an so not this Sunday, but the next Sunday, there will be the service event that was rescheduled. If you want more information about that, you can talk to Liz. She'll be happy to tell you about it. Finally, now we're just going to go into an activity. Since we're talking about love, we're going to be doing something called the 36 Questions to Fall in Love. It's basically this thing that was created by New York Times or like researchers with the New York Times, essentially with the mentality of if you sat down with somebody and asked all 36 of these questions, you would fall in love with them. Obviously, we're not trying to get you to like find your soulmate here tonight. So it'll be boys, just find another boy to talk to, girls, find another girl to talk to. And Madeline will put up a QR code up here. You can either scan that or literally just Google 36 questions to fall in love, and it'll pop up. So you guys can all just kind of find somebody of the same gender to do these questions with. And we'll do about 10 minutes, so you won't get all 36 of these questions done. But so you know, as you get deeper and deeper into it, they get a little bit more and more personal. So it may start off with like, who do you want to have dinner with? And then it may end with like, what's your relationship with your mom like? So just kind of keep that in mind. If you want to like skip every question to get closer to the end, get to the juicy details, feel free to do that. But yeah, just feel free to kind of spread yourselves out. I'll play a little bit of quiet music for the background so you guys don't have to feel like you're being super loud in the chapel. But with that being said, yeah, we'll just do that for like 10 minutes. Get to know somebody a little bit better. Okay. Um, so now, now we'll go into one of the last questions of the 36 questions to fall in love, which is probably the worst one for me, which is literally just stare at each other into the in each other's eyes, just stare into each other's eyes for a minute. I'm gonna stop the music. It's gonna be silence. The only thing that's gonna be there is you and the other person. So let's see. I'm starting it. Give me a second. Okay, timer starts now. Have to stare into their eyes. So if you guys could do me a favor now and kind of spread back out, just make sure you're keeping distance from each other. Um, and yeah. So I really like that, those questions. I think it's a fun thing to do, especially in a just like purely platonic and friendly way. Just a good way for you guys to get to better know each other. So if you ever feel like just doing it after arch, just turn to the person next to you and go home and do it. It'll be fun. But now going into our talk. So tonight we have Father Branson Hipp, who will be giving our talk on love, as you have heard. Father Branson Hipp is currently the chaplain at Georgia Tech. So please pray for him. That's a huge, heavy cross to bear. Georgia Tech, but he's really a great speaker, a great priest. I've been blessed to hear him speak multiple times. And a little fun story for you. Back when Pippo and I were in middle school and high school, we were in a program called the Columbian Squires. So the Columbian Squires is essentially like the mini Knights of Columbus, where we did nothing really, if I'm being honest with you. We cleaned up after the fish dinners, but we would get money, and we would have two different things that we would do with our money. The first option, we would go to Six Flags. All expenses paid, all of the squires would go to Six Flags. The second option is that we would send money to Father Branson Hipp, as he was a seminarian at the time. So that's just our little fun story, and as it's gone on, Pippo and I will often claim that we paid Father Branson's way through seminary. Father Tim would say that he only got through seminary because he had Father Branson by his side. So then me and Pippo would, of course, take credit for Father Tim. Thank you. Wow. And we would just try to see as far as we could take it. But yeah, that's really that. Just a little fun background to when I first met Father Branson. With that being said, Father Branson, you can go ahead and come on up.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, actually, when I saw Luke, I was like, Lashley, I know that name. You were a squire, weren't you? So thanks for keeping me alive in seminary. Let's say Hail Mary together, and we'll start. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I'm going to leave a lot of space, if possible, for questions. And I want for us to actually be able to speak honestly. So if you have a question about something, I want for that to be a possibility in this. And just even speak about the nature to be loved and what it really means to love, because it's a word that we hear a lot. And it's thrown around in a million different ways in such a way where the word can actually lose its meaning. Walker Percy would always talk about that. Part of the difficulty of Christianity is the Christian language itself is like a poker chip that's been handed from person to person until it loses what's actually on it, so you don't even know what the value of it is. We use certain words in so many ways so often that we actually lose what they mean. And even then, it's not super helpful to have a bunch of splendid, beautiful definitions of love. What's the point of that if we actually don't know how to love? So I want to kind of dig into that experience. And I was particularly struck by this because of 2 Sundays ago, the gospel was one of the scribes testing Jesus. And he asks him, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength. The second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And the thing that really struck me about that gospel is that in that exact moment, Jesus is both God and neighbor. He's literally right in front of him. In the Spanish, it said prójimo, proximate, right? The person most approximate to him. And yet, in that moment, he's actually trying to test him in order to get rid of him. So there's a fact right in front of him, and he's asking about love in a vague kind of philosophical way, and missing the one who is right in front of him. And I think we actually have that great capacity, especially today, where we can talk about these things. And we can even talk about ideas on a greater scale and actually miss the fact that's actually in front of us. What does it actually look like to love these people that we share life with? There's this really beautiful scene from The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, which just read during this summer. It's a giant monster of a book, but it's a good summer read. It's probably one of the greatest Christian novels ever written. Dostoevsky's a genius, but there's this scene where this woman comes to the monk Zosima and she's worried that she's losing her faith. And she's like, what do I do? I feel I'm losing my faith. And he, the holy monk Zosima just answers with great simplicity. He's look, treat the other person as if they are made in the image or likeness of God, and you will see that they are. And she's she's both being very pious and also not listening to anything he actually says. And then he says to her, I am sorry I can say nothing more consoling to you, for love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared with love in dreams. Love in dreams is greedy for immediate action, rapidly performed and in the sight of all. Men will even give their lives if only the ordeal does not last long but is soon over, with all looking on and applauding as though on the stage. But active love is labor and fortitude, and for some people too, perhaps a complete science. But I predict that just when you see with horror that in spite of all your efforts you are getting farther from your goal instead of nearer to it, at that very moment I predict that you will reach it and behold clearly the miraculous power of the Lord, who has been all the time loving and mysteriously guiding you. Before that he says, above all, avoid falsehood, every kind of falsehood, especially falseness to yourself. Watch over your own deceitfulness and look into it every hour, every minute. Avoid being scornful, both to yourself and both to others and to yourself. What seems to you bad within you will grow pure from the very fact of your observing it in yourself. Avoid fear too, though fear is only the consequence of every sort of falsehood. Never be frightened at your own faint-heartedness in attaining love. And don't be frightened overmuch even at your evil actions. I wanted to highlight that because again, the two things that I really want to carry away, and I'll even go into like kind of like the four different kinds of love and everything like that. But the two things that I think are really most important with this is, first of all, it's like God's method, like the way that God saved us. We have to go back to being astounded by this. Like God's method of saving us was he became man. Like he became present, tangible, experienceable in a specific time and place. This is the method of God, right? And it continues to today in the mystery of the church. So it's something like experienceable, right? So it's a question of like, what does it look like to love like the specific people in front of me? And this is very different. This is why like there's different kinds of love. But even then within friendships, like it looks differently. So it requires paying attention to the other person, right? If I want to show love to someone and I make them a cake, but then they're gluten-free, like that cake isn't going to do them a lot of good besides being like a nice gesture, you know? Like not knowing the other, this is a big mistake we make where we actually, like the real act of loving is striving to know the other. Really striving to get to know them, meaning paying attention to them, right? I was really struck many years ago by a college student just sharing with me like difficulties within the family, and her dad worked a lot, and her dad would like, because he worked a lot, would like keep buying her things, and her saying like, look, like all I want is for you to spend time with me, right? And he like wasn't seeing that, and the way he was trying to like make up for things was like buying stuff. So he was missing the way that she desired to receive love, and he wasn't paying attention to it. So that's the first thing, right? We have to like pay attention to the other. The second part is that we learn to grow in love in time. This is as weird as it is to say, I think this is something that we very often forget, that Christianity happens in time, right? One of the things we get frustrated with in others is if you've ever had like somebody in the church or whatever, and they're like, I remember you when you were this tall, and they treat you like you're a kid, and you're like, hey, like I drove here, like I'm grown up, you know? Like they've stopped. Like the image of you has stopped in their mind, right? And they no longer see you as they are because they've like created an image. Christianity happens in time. Like we are growing in time, and we learn how to love in time. So like I think one of the most difficult things for us in the modern world in understanding Christianity is we have this like sense of immediacy, which makes sense, right? Like literally ordered some coffee today on Amazon Prime, and it's going to be there, you know? And I'm real pumped. But like it's going to be there like immediately. And so much of everything is like immediately in front of us. But there's a reason Jesus used all of this garden imagery when he was talking about the parables of the kingdom of heaven, is it takes time, right? Like there's different seasons. And you like do the best you can. You plant it, you water it, fertilize it, you pay attention to it. You're constantly in relationship with it, and it takes time. And you're like dependent in some way because a plague can go through, or, you know, drought, whatever. Like you're in this like relationship of time, and there's like a proper time for like the plants to grow. And like that is the like relationship of the faith of like growing and learning how to love, is it takes time. And I think we have like a very great difficulty in understanding the dynamic of time within Christianity. And it just becomes more and more difficult when we get like impatient with ourselves. So like those two parts of it, I think, are crucial, of paying attention to the other, and it takes time. There's one other thing within this, and it's that there is and it took like a really long time for this to sink in, but when we talk about like the four different types of love, which are like storge, which is family love, family affection, like the love of family, phileo, which is like the love of like friendship, which by the way, like origin of the name Philadelphia, city of brotherly love, like friendly love, and then eros, right, erotic love, like the love between lovers, and then agape, like the like self-gift love of God. Like those are like the four different types, right? But the thing about it is, and like there's a couple books I would recommend on this. C.S. Lewis's book, The Four Loves, is not very long, very readable. It's really beautiful and helpful. Along with that, though, also Erasmo Leva Marikakis, who has a great name. He wrote a book. He's a Catholic. He actually, when his wife passed away and his kids grew up, he became a monk. He wrote the best commentary of Matthew I've ever read. But he has a book called Love's Sacred Order, which is reflecting more upon the four loves, and it is magnificent. Erasmo, that dude just gets it. Like he gets it. So Love Sacred Order, you can find it on Amazon. Those two books are like very, very helpful. But one of the things that they both really emphasize is like the natural dynamic of love without the proper like ordering of within the context of the love of Christ becomes an idol, or actually becomes like unfulfilled or stagnant unless it's within the greater relationship of Christ. And actually, it took me a long time to understand this and actually like doing a lot of marriage prep and a lot of marriage counseling to understand that there is a natural, and this is also like as a side note why like I think that like having a marriage like within the church and specifically within the context of Mass is super important, because on a natural level, there is a natural religiosity to marriage that is twofold. It's twofold in the sense that the first is that I heard this Princeton poet say once, he said, like, I began to believe in God when I met my wife because I needed someone to thank. She must have been amazing. I don't know. But like, yeah, he said, like, I began to believe in God when I met my wife because I needed someone to thank, right? When you really fall in love with the other or recognize them as a gift, meaning as given, like it opens you up to this like greater reality, and you have this like heart of gratitude, and it's like, I need to like someone to thank. You see it in movies too, right? Where the guy like has a good first date and like crushes it, and he's like skipping down the street and like giving money to the homeless and like whistling and all that, you know, like there's this like natural like gratitude that comes out of the experience of love. Well, who is that like gratitude to, right? That's the first part of like the natural religiosity of marriage, of recognizing the other as a gift. But there's a second part to it that we don't talk about often enough or really understand. And it's that when we really try to actually love others, when we really like actually try to do the work, what we discover within that is actually our incapacity to love them. How often we actually betray that. Like, even think about like experience of roommates or any relationships you're in, like our tendency to like leave stuff out, or you get hungry and you take some of their food. But like even with all of like the best intentions of the world, on a natural level, we have this like capacity to betray them or to like hurt them, right? Even with good intentions. And sometimes we don't even have good intentions, you know? And then the same with them, with us. Like you discover even in the like striving to love, a deep incapacity and like a disappointment with the other. So like there's two options within that. Like you either like pretend, there's a few options, but like for the most part, like pretend that doesn't exist, right? Which is what a lot of people do. Or it's, I need someone to actually save this love between us. I need someone to save this like dumpster fire that is like our love, because if not, like I will hurt the person that I claim to love the most. Like in my act of loving, I like betray them, right? I actually need to learn how to love. So like that dynamic reveals like the need for the love between us to actually be saved. And then you think about it, it makes sense that the sacrament of marriage happens within the context of Mass, because we hear Jesus say, this is my body given for you. And he entirely gives of himself, and he does what he says. He means what he says, and he does it, right? He is like perfect self-gift. So he actually, within his own flesh and blood, like solves that problem of like, I desire to love the other person, and yet I'm not capable of doing it, right? And so it happens within theirs of like, this is the one who can actually like save the love between us. So he like solves it. So it's like, I base my love within him, and he teaches me how to love. And in learning how to love, and like the other person learning how to love as well, we grow in the capacity to say to the other person, like, this is my body given for you, and like meaning it and actually being able to do it. So you see like the dynamic of Mass, of like marriage within the Mass, like responds to this deep problem within marriage that like most people would never even notice. Now, like when I go to like other friends' weddings that like aren't Catholic, and it's just like kind of vague things about love, like I kind of like, I have to like work at like not getting frustrated, because I'm like, you don't understand the problem. Like the problem really is like, how do I love the other? Like, what does it actually mean to love the other? And we use like cheap words and like cover over the difficulties. and yet like how beautiful for beautiful for me, like to be there and just to like hear like, this is my body given for you, and be like, I learn how to love the other through you, O Christ, and the companionship of the church. So I hope that that's clear of this like natural like religiosity of marriage, right? And of relationships, right? Like he actually teaches us how to love. Erasmo says, he says, the hard truth is that those who like eat love, like receive Christ, must themselves become love. So like Christ himself, like he actually teaches us how to love, like in the relationship with him. Like he is the one who does that. Agape is the love that makes me so free that I can bestow my substance on others in imitation of Christ, really. Like Christ, who is like perfect self-gift to us, and like living within the ambit of that love, like we begin to grow in the capacity to do that for others. But first by like receiving it from him, and receiving it from him, again, not in like a vague philosophical way, but experientially, by like sharing life with Christ, right? So that's the thing, is that like we, God becoming man like saves our humanity and is meant to make life like more human. And you see that he is the answer to like the human problem in all of these different aspects, but particularly within the like problem of like learning what it means to really love. I want to highlight just a couple things and then give like actually like space for questions. But like a couple things within like these different like dynamics of love, and just a couple like suggestions. So the first is like with Storke, like family love. One of the things I noticed, because like I'm on a college campus too, and I like was a student many years ago, is it's easy to like live life here and then kind of like forget about family, or like to like kind of live that as an obligation. And so I think like the importance of like living like family life, like thinking of our families and remembering them and like not forgetting them, and like calling them every now and then, and like knowing ourselves with that, like that's one way of like loving our family really well. So like for myself, like I'm very much like where I'm at, and so it's easy for me to like forget the outside world. So one of the ways that like helps me to love is sometimes I literally put in my calendar, call mom and dad, because I like know myself, right? Like this is something that like we learned, because I know like it's not that I like don't love them, it's that like I live like where I'm at like very intensely and just forget that the outside world exists. So I have to like help myself in my humanity of like for me, I need to schedule it, you know, of like when you're home, schedule like intentional time with them. Like even looking back, like, and I was pretty selfish, but I would be like, all right, like I'm gonna have like this one dinner with mom and dad, and I'm gonna spend the rest of the time out with my friends, you know. But to like live the time with them like very intentionally and pay attention to them. One time, my dad, he like asked for me to help him brew beer, and I like thought he just needed a favor, so I like read a book at the same time, because I was like, I'll multitask, I'll get two things done, you know, like I'll get homework done, and the truth is that like the thing I didn't notice or didn't realize is like he actually just wanted to hang out with me, and he also knew that at the time like I really liked beer, so he was actually like trying to do this thing, and I like totally missed it and was like reading my book and like handing him stuff. Like I can't imagine how like frustrated he must have been, right? Because I like didn't see. You know, like this is very often the problem. And then we like, you know, talk about all these, like grandstand in all these different ways, and like don't see the person in front of us, right? So don't forget like your parents, your family, like even before they're like your parents, like they're sons and daughters of the Father, and like they need things too. And so it's good to like, you know, have boundaries and everything like that, but just like don't forget their humanity and to like strive to see them, because sometimes we have an image of them and we like don't see the person, right? The other part is just like a brief word on friendship, like what it actually means to be like a real friend. Like Giussani, Monsignor Luigi Giussani gave this like beautiful definition of friendship. He talks about it as companionship towards destiny, And like both of those things, companionship towards destiny. Companionship in the sense of like you share life together, but then like towards destiny mean walking together towards how we are made, right? And like calling each other back towards that. Companionship towards destiny. He says friendship is going together towards destiny, going together towards the mystery that is God. This is the only true friendship, the only one that lasts. The rest are relationships of convenience. We have to decide whether we want to establish political relationships of convenience or to be truly friends. Do we want to play games with each other or accompany each other to destiny? I like look back on my life and like I don't know where I would be without my friends. You know, even now, like I need my friends. Like I was having like a rough go of it, and so I called my best friend and was like, "I'm coming to see you." And he's like, "Let's go," you know, and like we like chased his daughter chased us around the backyard, and it was like, "This is great," like hanging out, you know, like we need like our friends, but like part of this like friendship is like loving the destiny of the other, like loving their like future and like paying attention to that, right? How often people become like accomplices in helping each other to forget things, right? To like go party off on the weekend and like just like to like forget about life, right? But like real friendship is helping each other to like actually look at the difficult things and stay in front of them, right? The other thing is, again, if people exist in time, and again, like look at our history, look at like St. Paul, who was Saul, who killed Christians, right? He could have been seen as the enemy, and he's like one of the great like fathers of the church. If people exist in time, then the person that you can consider like your enemy or a problem, like that person could be Paul, you know? If they exist within time, they're just like a moment before the encounter. There's a Monsignor Lorenzo Albacete of happy memory. He's since gone to God. He was this hilarious, giant Puerto Rican priest. He's awesome. And there's a story of like him, he was with a group of like, so there's a group of friends with him in Las Vegas, and there's a group of priests, and one was like, "Oh, like Las Vegas, like that place is terrible." And Monsignor said it was like, "Let's go, like I want to explore." And then they asked the other priest, they were like, "What do you think of like the things that are going on here?" And he said, "I think it's 3:59 p.m. there." And what he meant by that is there's this line in John's gospel where when John and Andrew met Jesus, it says very specifically it was 4 p.m. Like they could remember the exact time that they were with him. It was so like distinct. So what he was saying is like these people that we could consider like whatever, right? He was saying like it's the minute before the encounter. It's the minute before the encounter. Like anything could happen, right? So like the other like exists in time, and they are like not my enemy. They could be like Paul. They could be like or Zacchaeus or Magdalene or any of them, like just a minute before the encounter, right? So striving to see the other and actually like understand them, especially today, especially when like ideology can actually like keep us from seeing others, you can discover that like the other is like not your enemy. But again, like all of us can grapple and struggle with this. That's why I'm so struck by like the Pharisees in front of Jesus. And at that moment, he is God and neighbor, and they're loving neither of those facts because they're stuck in their heads, right? God became man. Like Tertullian said, like the flesh is the hinge of salvation. It's a presence, a person right in front of us, right? Like we can't miss that. So companionship towards destiny. Last thing, again, I mentioned the like natural religiosity of marriage. Like the other is like given as a gift, and like also like you spend like the rest of your life in marriage like learning how to grow in love. Like it's the full trajectory of our lives. Same with like my vocation too. So like the priesthood is like I'm like learning how to love, and I learn how to love through Georgia Tech students, right? No comments. I knew it. I knew it was coming. I shouldn't have said anything. It is possible, but it is a great grace. Like that, like it's through the other that you learn how to love, right? It's a journey. And people have this idea of like, I want to like get to this point in the spiritual life, and then like I've arrived. And it's like, no, like new things will emerge. Massimo Kamisaka has this great line where he says like, loving others is an adventure that never ends. Like, there never comes a time with my brother, mother, sister, friend where I can say, like, well, now we've arrived, now we can settle. New things about the personality emerge, and we are called to, like, respond to that responsibly. It's an adventure. It is an adventure. Because in a moment, like, somebody can, like, fall and be injured, and then, like, you, like, figure things out in the house of, like, what, you know, or even, like, this person's quarantined, how do we feed them, you know? Like this is, and we can see it as, like, a problem or something that's, like, blocking life, or it's like, oh, like, you're teaching me how to love. Like, we go on this road together, a companionship towards destiny. Okay, and then, like we said, of, like, Christ, of, like, agape, like he is this. Like, first of all, like, we learn how to love through, like, the mystery of Christ. And I'll give you, like, kind of a parallel thing. Like, very often people talk about, like, struggling with patience, right? And people's ideas is, like, because I always ask, like, well, like, all right, so, like, how do you grow in patience? And they were like, I don't know, I just need to be more patient. And I was like, what does that even mean, right? Or, like, have you ever told somebody, like, be more patient? Does that work, you know? Like, so I was like, all right, stop, like, go back, right? Again, like, we can tend to get in the abstract. So it's like this question of, like, when is an experience, when, like, look at your experience, when was an experience then you, like, were more patient, right? For me, go back to the memory of, like, when I could not understand division, when I was a kid, not as an adult, but, like, I could not understand division. It made no sense in my brain. It made no sense. I was like, this is not a real thing. Everybody else is just pretending. Like those magic eye things, you know, where you're wondering, like, can other people actually see this, or are people just pretending? And, like, my dad, like, trying to, like, keep working on it with me, and he was, like, so patient. And I was at this point of, like, how are you so patient with me, right? Like, when someone is patient with you, you, like, discover, like, the possibility, like, it makes you, like, grateful, and then you desire to be, like, more patient with others. That's the thing. We think of it as, like, the starting point is, like, I need to do this. But for me, like, this is why, like, I go to confession too, is, like, I need mercy. And then in receiving mercy, I'm, like, so grateful. I desire to, like, give mercy to others. So it's a problem of actually, like, first attentiveness to Christ, and then in receiving it, you can live it with others, right? We learn how to love from him. And it's something that, like, we actually have to learn. And it's not a problem of learning, like, theological categories, even though those are like, really valuable and important and give us a direction. But it can't be reduced to that, because God became man, like a presence in front of us. Okay, there's a ton more things that could be said, but probably shouldn't right now. So I want to leave, like, a space for questions with any of this stuff, because it's super important. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so for me, like, the thing that I go back to in that is how often the Lord tried to speak to me, and it fell on deaf ears, and he didn't stop speaking to me, right? How often, like, I can, like, sit in prayer and just, like, the brain shuts off, right? He's there. The problem is I'm not really there. You know what I mean? So again, I go back to, like, how patient God has been with me, right? Like, he keeps trying to find new ways to break in. One of the things, like, because we're in year A for the Sunday readings, and so it's Matthew's gospel, and we've spent, like, how many Sundays hearing Jesus argue with the Pharisees and Sadducees, right? A lot, right? Even I'm up there, like, can we do something else, you know? Like this is a lot of arguing, you know? And the thing that strikes me about that, though, because especially today, like, most people are afraid to argue unless it's through the internet, like, thank you. That was funny. Some real comedy gold here. It's ignored. That's fine. No. Like, the thing about it is Jesus stays. He could be doing all these other things, but we hear like Sunday after Sunday, he stays. And the question is why? And it's because he loves them. And he loves the Pharisees and Sadducees and the Herodians. And he's trying to actually save them and find a new way for them to be open to receiving him. And for me, like, that moves my heart because I have like stuffed my ears and been so stubborn for so long. And even in these days, like, I have the capacity for stubbornness if I don't like the way that he does things, right? And so being in front of like the way that he is in front of the Pharisees like moves my heart. And then when trying to like love others and they're like just not receiving it, or they just only want to hear what they want to hear, or whatever, right? Or there's this like artificiality, or they're not being sincere in front of it, like Zosim was saying, like, don't deceive yourself. Like, above all, do not deceive yourself. When there is this like self-deception, like, it's frustrating, but then it's like, okay, but how patient you've been with me, Lord. Like, my like foolishness, like, he loves me in my foolishness. So like, I have to go back to that. Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. Yeah, that is like a perfect question. I'm going to tip you on the way out. Like, this was a part I wanted to talk about, but didn't think that there was time for it. There is this is why Erasmo calls his book Love's Sacred Order. There's an order to things. Because think about even the way that we grow up. The first way that we like learn how to love is through family life, right? Like, that's the first place. And that's why very often, like, when people need to be healed, it's usually connected to family stuff, because that's the first place, right? And then you grow up a little bit, and then friendship, right? Because it's like, oh, girls are gross at the beginning, or like boys or whatever, right? And then like romantic love, and then like out of all of these things, like, there is the like sign of like the love of God. So the first thing, like even like romantic love is like, all right, before that, like, I would argue like people really need to learn like what real friendship is, honestly, like what it actually means to be a friend. Because even in marriage, like, if like there isn't friendship within marriage, it becomes problematic. Because what happens when like those moments of difficulty, when eros grows cold, like, what do? So, but honestly, I think this is actually the first part of like the fact that we don't live relationships well, is we honestly don't know how to be friends. And part of that too is we think we know what it means to be a friend, and we never stop to actually look at what does real friendship look like. Again, we think we know, and we miss reality. My friend Father Jose Medina would say, like, the greatest way for the devil to separate us from God is by separating us from reality. The greatest way for the devil to separate us from God is by separating us from reality. Because reality reveals stuff. Even the experience of sin, right? Like, it leaves you like more cold and more alone, and makes life like duller. Like, that should tell us something, Reality like doesn't lie. So it's a beautiful, and so like learning from like family life and saying yes to that, really honestly looking at like, what does it look like to be a friend, and not in a vague way, but to be a friend to like the friends in my life. Because like loving different friends like is in different ways. I've had like the great gift of living with a number of different seminarians, like guys studying to be priests, like being able to like share ministry and share life with them, and I love it. And they're like very different, One guy, we would like sit on the back porch and just jam to music and talk about books, right? And the other one, I'd come home and he'd have a giant bowl of popcorn and be watching 30 for 30s on ESPN. And I was like, this is different, And it was like a very different friendship. And I was like, all right, we're talking about, you're a different person. You're not the same person as the other guy. We're going to bond over different things. And like, that's okay, right? So yeah, like I really, especially today, I think, and especially in a problem of ideology, and especially in a problem of like, in politics, the other is the enemy. How could you possibly believe whatever, right? What will like cross the divide is always friendship. Always friendship. Can you say a little bit more about that? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like I think like this is the radicality of Christianity in the sense of I think we genuinely learn how to forgive by allowing ourselves to be forgiven by Christ. Because his forgiveness isn't like, I'm going to pretend your sin doesn't exist, or, oh, don't worry about it, it's nothing. It's like, no, like, this is real stuff, and yet, like, you belong, right? So the first part of this is, I think, like, the sacrament of confession, like, staying in front of our stuff is really important. I don't think you can separate love and forgiveness. One thing, though, distinction that's really important is, like, forgiveness, first of all, is an act of the will. It's something we choose. I hear very often with people, they're like, I've forgiven this person, but I don't feel like I've forgiven them. And it's like, that's okay. Like, that takes time. Think about, like, if somebody jumps out and scares you and, like, the adrenaline's going and you, like, intellectually know you're safe, but your body is still in, like, fight or flight mode. Like, you know you're safe, but you don't feel safe. You know what I mean? So, like, there is, like, an act of the will within that, and then we have to, like, heal and stuff like that. But the two, like, they aren't separated. And along with forgiveness, though, we have to ask the question of, like, because this is where it gets really complicated, of, again, what does it look like to love this person in this moment? Because you can forgive someone, but that doesn't necessarily mean you may enable them. And that gets really complicated. And so, again, like, always asking the question, what does it look like to love this person's destiny? Because that may mean that, like, I forgive them, but it's better for me, like, for both of us to not be around each other. And that like, again, like, the theoretical side, like, what does it look like to love this person in this moment, right? Cool. Anything else? Maybe one more and then we'll stop, right, Luke? Okay. Yeah, it's a good question. There is a book that I try to read every year called Is It Possible to Live This Way? By Monsignor Luigi Giussani. It's actually a series of conferences that he gave with 100 young people that were preparing for potentially consecrated life. And he's asking the question, is it really possible to live like this? Like, is this, like, can you actually live this in the modern world? And in America, it's been broken up into 3 books. Like, the Italian and the Spanish are actually one book. But, like, it's faith, hope, and love, right? And he's like, what do these actually look like? How do you live them? And the part on love, charity, he defines it as gift of self moved, right? Gift of self moved. So you see the 2 parts in that, right? Giving of myself, the action, but then being moved, right? Because if someone says, like, they're like, I'm doing this out of duty, like, do you feel loved in that moment? You know? If someone's just like, I'm going to do this out of duty, you know, like, I give of myself for you, you're like, okay, cool, you know? And even, like, the language in the scripture where it talks about Christ, like, or, like, throughout, like, God revealing himself, like, he's, like, in Jeremiah, he's like, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I've been moved by your nothingness. Jesus looking at the crowds, and it says, like, he is, like, his heart is moved because they are like sheep without a shepherd. So you're right, it's a synthesis, right? We're body and soul. God became man. So this, like, act of charity is, like, both parts. Gift of self, moved. And I found that, like, I actually find, like, that part particularly beautiful. That, like, God is actually, like, moved by my nothingness, right? Okay. I think we're done. Yep. ahead,
Thank you
Madeline.
so much. For those joining us on the live stream, thank you. And just a reminder that our last art will be November 19th, and it is on mental health. Reminder that we have books in the back that Joey left us last week, and that we have a prayer basket, so please leave us your prayer intentions. So we're about to head into discussion groups, and if you guys haven't been to an art night before, we don't have any questions prepared for you guys. It's just for you to have organic discussions and try to make these end around 8:15 just for the sake of your time. So the first group will be Trisha, Maddie, Walter, Jackson, and Melina. If you could go to the old student room. And then the rest of the girls in this front half